Okay, go for it.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever in the world you are. It's V the Grill Economist coming to you live, and we have none other than Harley Schlanger with us, and it's another day to hang with Harley. So without further ado, Harley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, V. How are you?
I forgot to tell you that I'm still a little under the weather, fighting a cold, but much better than before, and I'm glad to have you on, Harley. I mean, there's so many things going on in this world, wheels within wheels. Trump just got back from Asia. There's supposedly 1,186 sealed indictments that have been delivered through federal courts nationwide. Lots of things are happening, and I'm just chomping at the bit. What say you, Harley?
Well, you never know about these so-called sealed indictments. Uh,
Exactly.
there are a lot of rumors about them. Sometimes I think they're just indicting seals.
Sealed. Yeah, I think that's what it is. They're sealed indictments. They're indicting seals, all sorts
Now,
of seals. That's why there's
uh,
160 of them in California. There's a lot of sea lions over there. So
now on the more important side, we have the return of Trump and two completely different narratives. It's as though there are two different universes. On the one hand, I was just reviewing last night the responses that Trump got on the trip. South
oh, it's
Korea, 20
incredible.
standing ovations from the National Assembly. Abe talking about the great relationship he has with Trump in the United States. Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan. Prime Minister Moon or President Moon of South Korea, also saying this was a wonderful trip. Trump was very well received and was reciprocal in the way he treated us. The Chinese visit was out of this world in terms of the personal relationship and also the potential to bring the United States into a much closer economic alliance with China. Then what I think no one heard about in this country was the speech that Trump gave in Vietnam to the National Assembly,
Hmm.
which was quite beautiful, where he said it's Veterans Day in the United States, or maybe it was the day before Veterans Day, and he said we both have veterans of a horrible war
Mm.
in the United States and Vietnam, where we both suffered.
Yeah.
And the Americans and the Vietnamese who fought and died thought they were doing so for the interests of their country. And they have to be honored because of that. On the other hand, it's on us, our responsibility to make sure that we don't have wars like that in the future. And the relationship is blossoming with all of these countries in Asia.
Hmm.
Now, then you read the Washington Post, and it says Trump trip not the total fiasco that most expected.
Oh God.
Then they quote from the Financial Times saying everyone was laughing behind his back, especially the Chinese.
Oh my God. That's not what happened. The-
Well, then you have the story. All these deals are old deals. Nothing's going to come of them. There's not going to be any jobs. Well, there already have been jobs created in West Virginia, Montana, in Indiana, and Iowa. Ask those people who just got jobs if there are no jobs as a result of this trip. So, what we're seeing is an effort to keep the American people completely clueless, saying that Trump is easily manipulated if you stroke his ego.
sure.
Uh, that Trump was seduced by the pomp and splendor, but it was really a deception operation against him.
Right.
And on and on and on and on. Then you have in The Guardian, a new book is out, which basically is called Colluding with Russia.
Oh
Uh,
God.
I don't have the name of the author. He's the former Moscow bureau chief of The Guardian who was thrown out of Russia because he was working with the opposition against the government. And he's now written a book where he says that Christopher Steele's dossier is 80 to 90% accurate.
Bull crap. Unbelievable.
We know that's not true, but we also know that Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS have been fighting like hell. And Fusion GPS was a company that hired him uh, with money from the Clinton campaign and from Barack Obama.
Yep.
That they've been fighting like hell to avoid subpoenas by the Congress, fighting to keep out of court. He's made some admissions in the court in England that are quite damning, including acknowledging that it was money from the Clinton campaign that he did brief press in the United States in July of 2016. So when Hillary says none of this was public, so it didn't matter for the campaign, it was all out there. And then that the FBI was well aware of it, and the FBI was even willing to take up paying for him after the Clinton campaign dropped it.
Mm-hmm.
So, this brings up the case of real collusion. British intelligence, the FBI, and the Clinton campaign and the DNC. And of course, the DNC was not an independent operation. It was a wholly owned subsidiary of the Clinton campaign. So, with this story coming out, and at the same time, the press ignoring the mainstream press, ignoring it, and ignoring the importance of what Trump did in Asia.
Yeah.
That escalating the attack. And then there's one other thing, irony I want to highlight here. They make it seem as though Barack Obama was so successful in diplomacy as opposed to Trump.
Exactly.
Remember his trip to China? He went there for a G20.
Yep, he came down through the plane's own cargo ladder.
Yeah, they didn't even have a ladder for him, a
No.
stairway for him.
Mm-hmm.
He was at odds. His entourage was fighting with Chinese officials about how the U.S. press, got to stand next to the leaders instead of the Chinese press. It was a complete catastrophe. Now, why was it a catastrophe? What was Obama's policy for China? The so-called Asia pivot.
Asia pivot, right.
What was the Asia pivot? The idea that we can't compete with China because they're not fair. So therefore, we're going to exclude them from trade negotiations, exclude them from the so-called free trade agreement.
Yeah, the toilet paper protocol is known as the TPP.
Yeah, exactly. And that we're going to challenge them militarily in the South China Sea and elsewhere.
Right.
So Trump goes there and says, look, we should be working together. Let's come up with some deals. The fact that he didn't come back with $300 billion in hand is not the point. The point is these things are a process. What he laid out and what was appreciated by the Asian leaders was a strategy which says we're going to work for mutual benefit, whether they're bilateral or multilateral deals, mutual benefit. We're not going to allow you to take advantage of us, and we're not going to take advantage of you.
Right.
And this was appreciated throughout the Asian nations that were there. And then the coup de grace was the meeting with Putin was canceled. And yet he had 3 brief encounters with Putin, which were all very friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And out of it, we got a new agreement on Syria, which respects Syrian independence, Syrian sovereignty, and a negotiating process which includes all the so-called opposition groups except the hardcore jihadists. So this is another step forward. And what's the story coming out? Trump is colluding with Putin. Trump is colluding with Xi Jinping. Trump is being manipulated. The U.S. is getting nothing from this. So what's the real story here? Whether Americans want to believe it or not, Trump is breaking with the old paradigm. He's breaking with the unilateral U.S. free trade agreements that harm our nation and harm the people of other nations that sign them. He's breaking with the regime change policy. And it's a work in progress. It's not by any way a beautiful finished product. But instead of giving him any credibility for it, or for God's sakes, backing him up maybe, they're still moving to try and throw him out of office, to explicitly reverse the election from 2016. So I wanted to start with that because I think it's really important for the American people to get a real picture of this, and go to the whitehouse.gov and see some of his speeches. He made a beautiful speech in China thanking Xi Jinping for the hospitality. The Chinese media is filled with stories about how this was something new, that this was a great start for a new relationship. You think of the end of Casablanca. This is the beginning of a new relationship. But I think that's what's happening. And they don't want you to know.
You know what's amazing is when I saw on the ground reporting where independent journalists were going up to the Chinese citizenry on the street and asking them what they think of Donald Trump. And the response was mind-blowing. They love him, Harley.
Yeah.
They love him. They admire him. They admire his family. I mean, I'll tell you right now, in New York, the Chinese clamor to buy, Trump properties. They
Yeah.
clamor for it. So
More
they know
collusion.
what they're getting. And they all said he's smart, that he's an incredible businessman.
Yeah.
And they're saying that this community organizer, this half-wit who couldn't even run a lemonade stand called Barack Obama, is somehow a better negotiator than Donald Trump. You have this is the insanity of the media world that these idiots live in, man. It's unbelievable.
Remember, we've discussed this before. Obama's Trans-Pacific Partnership, or maybe it was the Transgender Partnership.
That's what it is.
What Obama proposed with that was that we're going to increase trade with Asia by excluding the largest trade partner we have in Asia.
And the largest, in technically the largest economy in the world, and the largest, trading country on the planet. You can't do a trade partnership without China. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. But yet these idiots are so drunk on their own Kool-Aid, they're so consumed and convinced that what they in the West have to offer is what everybody in the world wants to buy, which is the worthless paper of Wall Street.
Yeah. Well, and that in fact was one of the sub themes that the Chinese press did cover, which is this discussion of why won't China open their banks to the West? All you have to do is look at the banks of the West and see why. They're looking for cash. They're looking for liquidity. They're looking to loot. There was an interesting development at the European Union in the last couple of days where they solidified a new set of rules or laws which say, number one, there will never be banking separation. In other words, no Glass-Steagall. That's now in the European Central Bank's constitution. Secondly,
Oh,
there
wow.
will be no restrictions on derivative trading.
Oh, that's good.
You remember Marco Zani, who was
Yeah.
on with you. He put out a statement saying what they've just done is put on steroids the plan to trade the exact type of financial instruments that led to the crash in 2008. So that's the
Unbelievable.
EU. That's the banking community. So you look at these idiots who don't understand that an economy has to produce something besides paper.
Paper, right? And I mean, can we expect anything less? I mean, can we really expect anything less from these politicians in the EU who are literally in the back pocket and has been proven to be in the back pocket of none other than people like George Soros?
Well, in fact, Nigel Farage made an interesting comment the other day. He said, "You're worried about $100,000 of placements of ads in Facebook by supposedly Russian operations. How about $18 billion by Soros spread around Eastern Europe and Russia to try and overthrow those governments?"
Right, right.
Now, another interesting thing, you had this march in Poland the other day of 60,000 hardcore, I don't know if you want to call them right-wing nationalists or what. There's some troubling aspects to it because there are neo-Nazi groups in some of these countries. So the immediate reaction of the media is to say this is Trump's fault and this is Trump's network. Where were those people, journalists, when neo-Nazis marched in Ukraine and overthrew an elected government?
Nowhere to be seen.
Well, they said that there's no evidence that despite the fact that the Ukrainian neo-Nazis were marching with swastikas.
Yeah, despite the fact that the Svoboda, which is the neo Nazis in Ukraine, not only they have the Nazi flags, they also had Nazi insignias on the uniform, marching right behind the extreme liberals and their ridiculous cameras for the entire world to see. And they're saying it's not there. There's no problem. Everything's fine.
Well, and the poster boy for the movement was Stefan Bandera, who was a war criminal who led Ukrainians to join the Nazi SS to exterminate Romanians, Poles, Jews, and Russians, which is one of the reasons that the Russians reacted to the coup
Yep.
legitimately. And yet, when Putin reacts to the threats made against ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine, he's somehow wrong. And yet the neo-Nazis can march in Ukraine and they're not identified for what they are.
Yeah.
So again, the
Exactly.
hypocrisy there is extraordinary. And of course, Soros is in the middle of it. Soros, in fact, there's some people looking into whether he funded some of these so-called right-wing groups that were marching in Warsaw.
Yeah. Of course.
Which
There's no doubt about it.
typical, the British called it gang counter gang.
Hmm.
You
Oh, yeah.
create the two sides and then you use overwhelm a nation's independence. So we're seeing the same
Exactly.
game played out over and over and over. But I think what is important is that people not get skeptical or cynical or start to say Trump is sold out. There are a lot of things he's done that I don't like.
Yeah, it's too early in the game to say that, and I think that's what people need to understand. That's why I'm reserving judgment to, you know, I mean, there are to see. I'm waiting to see who gets in handcuffs. I'm waiting for the 2018 midterm elections. There's still a lot of work to be done, and for people to just quickly throw in the towel, it's just way too early in the game.
Well, and it's okay to criticize him when he does something he shouldn't be doing, when he's
Absolutely.
working with the globalists or working with Goldman Sachs crowd and so on.
Hmm.
But to not recognize that he's overturning a geopolitical doctrine that was put in place by Harry Truman, that was challenged to some extent by Eisenhower, challenged by John Kennedy, and I think it cost Kennedy his life. And since the time of Kennedy, this geopolitical doctrine has dominated this idea of a unipolar world. Initially, it was the two empires, the US and the West versus the Soviet Union. Since 1990, 91, it's been a unipolar world empire. And Trump is challenging that. The fact that he hasn't gotten rid of all the creeps and pedophiles and liberals and Wall Street people, I think you're right. There's still time, but the direction that he's going should be getting support from the population. And in the meantime, we've got to go out and go after the Republicans and the Democrats who are part of the Wall Street crowd.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of them
Right.
in both.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct, and that's what needs to be done. Is we need to go after these charlatans and expose them, and I think that's what's happening. I think that's what's happening. I think there is a sea change, and at the end of the day, Harley, it's a very 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 complex thing, and it's not something that can be done quickly.
No, but look what's happening with the defenders of Hillary Clinton right now with
Mm.
what's been unleashed when you are at the center of a very dirty operation and suddenly it gets unleashed and stories start seeping out from the sewer.
Hmm.
People can smell it. People can see that this is now maybe open season. I think maybe Donna Brazil's book was in part designed to push Hillary out of the way, but Hillary doesn't get the message. And
She
why
doesn't.
should she? Why should she? Because she's still at the center of this gang of criminals and speculators who control the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a lot of money involved in it, and a
Hmm.
lot of skeletons in the closet. Things are coming out of the closet, but not the skeletons yet.
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. And the whole entire thing is we're dealing with people that are completely criminal, but they're also completely blinded by their own pride. It's incredible to see all of this.
Well, it's because the mirror, it's like the mirror, mirror on the wall. If they don't only have to go by what the media says, the media has held them blameless. The
Hmm.
media never said that Wall Street destruction of the middle class in this country, for the people who lost hope and ended up dying with opioids and other kinds of drugs and alcohol poisoning. They've never been held responsible for taking the life savings
Hmm.
of millions of Americans, including over half the African American population in the United States was devastated by the collapse of the mortgage-backed securities because they were holding a lot of those homes.
Right.
Their net wealth tied up in their home, and all of a sudden they'd done a remortgage, a second mortgage, and all of a sudden they found out their house was now worth 20% what they just committed themselves to pay in debt, in new debt. So no one's taken responsibility for that. And I think
Yeah.
this is what Trump needs to move ahead now and say, look, we're really going to address the forgotten man and woman. We're going to get you jobs. We're going to clean this mess up. And we're going to make sure that the predators of all stripes and sizes and shapes are going to pay the price for what they've done to you.
Exactly. Exactly correct. Harley, we're down to the end of the show. If you want to give out your contact information and how people could follow you, as well as your closing comments.
Yeah, you can go to larouchepack.com, and I think I've given out this new address I have that posts my articles every week. It's lpac.co/Harley. So it's not larouchepack.com. This is lpac.co/Harley. And I'm posting at least one article a week on that. And you've been very good at posting some of these things. And gee, I was sorry to hear that James separated his shoulder. Is that what
Yeah,
happened?
yeah. He slipped and tripped and fell down the steps and separated his shoulder, so he's out of commission for a little bit.
He's been doing an excellent job of
Hmm.
keeping things moving on the site. So
Oh,
my
absolutely.
wishes for a speedy recovery to him.
Yep. Exactly. 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 So with that being said, Harley, thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back here at the same time, same bat channel, same bat station. Thank you so much for everyone for listening in, and take it away, CJ.